Hello everybody, this is Facts Fiveum. Today, we're going to be going over a speech by none other than George Wallace of Alabama. Yes, that George Wallace, the George Wallace most famous for this scene.
Today, I have stood where once Jefferson Davis stood and took an oath to my people. It is very appropriate that from this cradle of the Confederacy, this very heart of the great Anglo-Saxon Southland, that today we sound the drum for freedom, as have our generation of forebears before us done time and again down through history. Let us rise to the call of freedom-loving blood that is in us and send our answer to the tyranny that clanks its chains upon the South. In the name of the greatest people that have ever trod this earth, I draw the line in the dust and toss the gauntlet before the feet of tyranny, and I say segregation now, segregation tomorrow, and segregation forever.
However, aside from that speech, George Wallace has made plenty of other... Fuck it, he's just a very unpleasant guy to listen to at times. I personally find him to be a fascinating figure in American history. I've probably read more about him and know more about him than the average American should. And that's why I want to take a look at this speech in particular. Because this speech, well, I like to call it the time is a flat fucking circle speech. And you'll see why very, very soon. Of course, the actual speech was called The Civil Rights Movement, Fraud, Sham, and Hoax. It was delivered on July 4th, 1964, just 2 days after the Civil Rights Act of 1964 was signed into law by President Lyndon Baines Johnson. Before I continue, I would like to implore you, my humble listener, to share this around, if only just to throw in the face of your really annoyingly smug uncle. You know the one I'm talking about. Or even, you know what? It gives me dopamine, okay? Like when you like and subscribe, it makes me feel good. And you can give me money too at Ko-fi or Ko-fi, whatever the kids are calling it these days. I'll probably bathe in the money or something. I'll have to think of the stupidest thing I could possibly do with money that's given to me. And when I do, I'll let you know. If any of you have any ideas, feel free to send them my way. And without further delay, let's get into George Wallace's Time is a Flat Fucking Circle speech. July 4th, 1964. We come here today in deference to the memory of those stalwart patriots who, on July 4th, 1776, pledged their lives, their fortunes, and their sacred honor to establish and defend the proposition that governments are created by the people, empowered by the people, derive their just powers from the consent of the people, and must forever remain subservient to the will of the people. Today, 188 years later, we celebrate that occasion and find inspiration and determination and courage to preserve and protect the great principles of freedom enunciated in the Declaration of Independence. It is therefore a cruel irony that the President of the United States has only yesterday signed into law the most monstrous piece of legislation ever enacted by the United States Congress. It is a fraud, a sham, and a hoax. This bill will live in infamy. To sign it into law at any time is tragic. To do so upon the eve of the celebration of our independence insults the intelligence of the American people. It dishonors the memory of countless thousands of our dead who offered up their very lives in defense of principles which this bill destroys. Never before in the history of this nation have so many human and property rights been destroyed by a single enactment of the Congress. It is an act of tyranny. It is the assassin's knife stuck in the back of liberty. With this assassin's knife and a blackjack in the hand of the federal force cult, the left-wing liberals will try to force us back into bondage. Bondage to a tyranny more brutal than that imposed by the British monarchy, which claimed power to rule over the lives of our forefathers under sanction of the divine right of kings. Today, this tyranny is imposed by the central government, which claims the right to rule over our lives under sanction of the omnipotent black-robed despots who sit on the bench of the United States Supreme Court. This bill is fraudulent in intent, in design, and in execution. It is misnamed. Each and every provision is mistitled. It was rammed through the Congress on the wave of ballyhoo promotions and publicity stunts reminiscent of P.T. Barnum. So I have in front of me a page from the United States Senate's official website, specifically on June 10th, 1964, which references Claire Engle from California. Claire Engle was one of the senators from California who, at this point, had a brain tumor which made it difficult for him to function, not much less speak. Now let me just read the last couple of paragraphs. Never in the history had the Senate been able to muster enough votes to cut off a filibuster on a civil rights bill, and only 5 times in the 47 years since the cloture rule was established had the Senate agreed to cloture for any measure. The clerk proceeded to call the roll. When he reached Mr. Engle, there was no response. A brain tumor had robbed California's mortally ill Claire Engle of his ability to speak. Slowly lifting a crippled arm, he pointed to his eye, thereby signaling his affirmative vote. Few of those who witnessed this heroic gesture ever forgot it. When Delaware's John Williams provided the decisive 67th vote, Majority Leader Mike Mansfield exclaimed, "That's it!" Richard Russell slumped, and Hubert Humphrey beamed. With 6 wavering senators providing a 4-vote victory margin, the final tally stood at 71 to 29. 9 days later, the Senate approved the act itself, producing one of the 20th century's towering legislative achievements. So, quite literally, this senator was mortally ill. He couldn't speak, and he freaking pointed to his own eye to say "I." And, well, it's not written here, but he died like a month or 2 later. And I have to say that, I guess he and John McCain are like the only 2 senators I can think of who would cast a vote like that and then die before anyone could try to exact revenge on him. It was enacted in an atmosphere of pressure, intimidation, and even cowardice, as demonstrated by the refusal of the United States Senate to adopt an amendment to submit the bill to a vote of the people. I want to say that I am not aware of any instance in United States history where a federal law has ever been submitted by a nationwide popular vote. As far as I'm concerned, there's nothing in the Constitution that currently permits that. Granted, he does say an amendment to submit the bill to a vote of the people, which makes me wonder, is he referring to an amendment to the bill itself or an amendment to the Constitution? Because amending the Constitution does not consist of that sort of thing either. Amending the Constitution, well, there are 2 ways to do it. The first is to get, I believe, 3/4 of the states together to host a constitutional convention. This has never happened before in American history. Nobody knows what it would look like. The more normal way to amend the Constitution is you need, I believe, 2/3 of the House and Senate to, or maybe it was just, you need a type of supermajority of the House and Senate. Then instead of going to the president, it goes to the states, and if you can get 2/3 of the individual states to ratify it, then it becomes part of the Constitution. Now, hypothetically speaking, I do believe that any of the states could write in their own state constitutions that such a referenda process would be done through popular plebiscite, ratification process would be done through a popular plebiscite. However, that is the only possible thing that I could think of that would involve amending the national constitution through any sort of plebiscite. To illustrate the fraud, it is not a civil rights bill, it is a federal penal code. It creates federal crimes which would take volumes to list and years to tabulate because it affects the lives of 192 million American citizens. Every person in every walk and station of life and every aspect of our daily lives becomes subject to the criminal provisions of this bill. It threatens our freedom of speech, of assembly, or association, and makes the exercise of these freedoms a federal crime under certain conditions. It affects our political rights, our right to a trial by jury, our right to the full use and enjoyment of our private property, the freedom from search and seizure of our private property and possessions, the freedom from harassment by federal police, and, in short, all the rights of individuals inherent in a society of free men. Ministers, lawyers, teachers, newspapers, and every private citizen must guard his speech and watch his actions to avoid the deliberately imposed booby traps put into this bill. It is designed to make federal crimes of our customs, beliefs, and traditions. I really have to admire the way George Wallace is very good at just claiming the victim, playing the victim, being the victim, 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 victim. Especially, well, let's be real here, the customs, beliefs, and traditions I'm sure that he's defending may or may not include the belief that African Americans are less than white and they should be treated accordingly. Likewise, he talks about the federal authority gone mad and how it could limit freedom of speech, but I do want to point out that under his governorship in Alabama, if you spoke the wrong way, you wouldn't be surprised if the KKK came at your door. Now, while the KKK was not officially a government arm, Wallace's base of support from the Klan, as well as his general unwillingness to do much about it, demonstrates that he really doesn't care much about free speech, just the aesthetic of it, the facade of it, if you will. Therefore, under the fantastic powers of the federal judiciary to punish for contempt of court, and under their fantastic powers to regulate our most intimate aspects of our lives by injunction, every American citizen is in jeopardy and must stand guard against these despots. Yet there are those who call this a good bill. It is people like Senator Hubert Humphrey and other members of Americans for Democratic Action. It is people like Ralph Mcgill and other left-wing radical apologists. Senator Hubert Humphrey was a senator from Minnesota. He later became vice president shortly after this, as when JFK got assassinated and LBJ took the helm, I guess there just wasn't a vice president for a while or something, but at some point after this, he was elected vice president in Lyndon B. Johnson's landslide electoral victory of 1964. He then tried to run for president as a Democrat in 1968 and lost narrowly against Richard Nixon. Ralph Mcgill, according to his Wikipedia page, was an American journalist and editorialist and anti-segregationist editor. He published the Atlanta Constitution newspaper. Okay. Americans for Democratic Action, believe it or not, still exists. They are a liberal political activist group. I want to say ADA, in the off chance one of you is listening, all right, flaunt this shit. Like talk about how the OG segregationist George Wallace himself hated your guts. That's probably going to get you a lot more cred. Just saying. They called it a good bill before it was amended to restore the right to trial by jury in certain cases. Yet a federal judge may still try one without a jury under the provisions of this bill. It was the same persons who said it was a good bill before the amendment pretending to forbid busing of pupils from neighborhood schools. Yet a federal judge may still order busing from one neighborhood school to another. They have done it. They will continue to do it. As a matter of fact, it is but another evidence of the deceitful intent of the sponsors of this bill for them to claim that it accomplished any such thing. It was left-wing radicals who led the fight in the Senate for the so-called Civil Rights Bill, now about to enslave our nation. we find Senator Hubert Humphrey telling the people of the United States that quote-unquote non-violent demonstrations would continue to serve a good purpose through a quote-unquote long, busy, and constructive summer. Yet this same senator told the people of this country that passage of this monstrous bill would ease tensions and stop demonstrations. This is the same senator who has suggested, now that the Civil Rights Bill is passed, that the president call the 50 state governors together to work out ways and means to enforce this rotten measure. There is no need for him to call on me. I am not about to be a party to anything having to do with the law that is going to destroy individual freedom and liberty in this country. I am having nothing to do with enforcing a law that will destroy our free enterprise system. I am having nothing to do with enforcing a law that will destroy neighborhood schools. I am having nothing to do with enforcing a law that will destroy the rights of private property. I am having nothing to do with enforcing a law that destroys your right and my right to choose my neighbors or sell my house to whomever I choose. I am having nothing to do with enforcing a law that destroys the labor seniority system. I am having nothing to do with this so-called Civil Rights Bill. The liberal left-wingers have passed it. Now let them employ some pink-nick social engineers in Washington, D.C. to figure out what to do with it. The situation reminds me of the little boy looking at the blacksmith as he hammered a red-hot horseshoe into the proper shape. After minutes of hammering, the blacksmith took the horseshoe, splashed it into a tub of water, and threw it steaming onto a sawdust pile. The little fellow picked up the horseshoe and dropped it quickly. "What's the matter, son?" the blacksmith said. "Is that shoe too hot to handle?" "No, sir," the little boy said. "It just don't take me long to look at a horseshoe." It's not going to take the people of this country long to look at the Civil Rights Bill either, and they are going to discard it just as quickly as the little boy tossed away the still hot horseshoe. But I am not here to talk about the separate provisions of the Federal Penal Code. I'm here to talk about principles which have been overthrown by the enactment of this bill. The principles that you and I hold dear, the principles for which our forefathers fought and died to establish and to defend, the principles for which we came here to rededicate ourselves. But before I get to that, let me point out one important fact. It would have been impossible for the American people to have been deceived by the sponsors of this bill had there been press to tell the people exactly what the bill contained. If they had the integrity and the guts to tell the truth, this bill would never have been enacted. Who ever heard of truth put to the worst in free and open encounter? We couldn't get the truth out to the American people. You and I know that's extremely difficult to do where our newspapers are owned by out-of-state interests. Newspapers which are run and operated by left-wing liberals, communist sympathizers, members of the Americans for Democratic Action, and other communist front organizations with high-sounding names. However, we will not be intimidated by the vultures of the liberal left-wing press. We will not be deceived by their lies and distortions of the truth. We will not be swayed by their brutal attacks upon the character and reputation of any honest citizen who dares stand up and fight for liberty. And we are not going to be influenced by intellectually bankrupt editors of the Atlanta Journal and Constitution, one of whom has presided over the dissolution of the once great Atlanta Constitution. Whoop, whoop, whoop. There it is, folks. There it fucking is. Even in the 1960s, these assholes were like, oh, it's the liberal media. They're the ones who are making us look bad. Oh, yeah. Of course, it's the liberal fucking media. Not the fact that you have George fucking Wallace, Mr. Segregation now, segregation tomorrow, segregation forever. No. That's not the reason people are against you. It's the liberal fucking media. You see, like, it's just this typical right-wing populist nonsense. Everything is everyone else's fault. It's those out-of-state establishment folks who somehow have so much power that control everything, and also the secret communist fucking fronts. Nowadays, it's the same shit. Anything remotely left of center, oh, it's part of a liberal media communist establishment plot. Yeah, as if the establishment is remotely radical left. My fucking vey. You know, one part of me wants everyone to just take even this little clip and send it to that member of their family, because just about everyone in America has at least one really annoying right-wing populist insane kooky type member. and just rub it in their faces, but it's not going to change their minds. It never really was about the establishment or about, liberty. It's just the aesthetic of it, the facade of it. It feels like there's an out-of-state left-wing establishment. Never mind the fact that for about 100 years at this point, the southern, or actually maybe like 80-ish, many, many decades at this point, the southern Dixiecrats had been dominating state legislatures and federal legislatures because they restricted voting rights so heavily that it basically allowed the incumbents to pick all their voters to make sure that they got continually reelected. And since they got continually reelected, they ended up with a lot of clout, a lot of seniority. They could kill bills, they could filibuster bills. But no, the fact that for the first time in, I think what did the Senate website say, 47 fucking years? That the American people were like, no, we're sick and tired of being bullied by the South. George Wallace is like, where, the liberal media, where, no, shut the fuck up. Shut the fuck up. And you know what? Let's just have some smug, libtard celebration. Y'all ready for this? We can understand his bitterness and his bleak failure, but we need not tolerate his vituperative and venomous attacks upon the integrity and character of our people. These editors, like many other left-wingers in the liberal press, are not influenced by tradition. Theirs is a tradition of scalawags. Their mealy-mouthed platitudes disgrace the honored memory of their predecessors, such men of character as Henry Grady, Joel Chandler Harris, and Clark Howell, men who made the name of the Atlanta Constitution familiar in every household throughout the South. They are not worthy to shine the shoes of those great men. In this connection, I want to pay my highest respects and compliments to the dedicated men of Atlanta and Georgia who gave to the people of their state what is destined to become the true voice of the South. I have reference to the great newspaper, the Atlanta Times. It is a sad commentary on the period which we live that it is necessary for the people of a great city to start their own newspaper in order to get the truth. I hope you have some success in this venture, and I assure you there will be many subscribers in the state of Alabama, including myself. As I have said before, that federal penal code could never have been enacted into law if we had a responsible press who was willing to tell the American people the truth about what it actually provides, nor would we have had a bill had it not been for the United States Supreme Court. Now, on the subject of the court, let me make it clear that I am not attacking any member of the United States Supreme Court as an individual. However, I do attack their decisions. I question their intelligence, their common sense, and their judgment. I consider the federal judiciary system to be the greatest single threat to individual freedom and liberty in the United States today, and I'm going to take off the gloves in talking about these people. There is only one word to describe the federal judiciary today. That word is lousy. They assert more power than claimed by King George III, more power than Hitler, Mussolini, or Khrushchev ever had. They assert the power to declare unconstitutional our very thoughts, to create for us a system of moral and ethical values, to outlaw and declare unconstitutional, illegal, and immoral the customs, traditions, and beliefs of the people. And furthermore, they assert the authority to enforce their decrees in all these subjects upon the people without their consent. I know I've said this before, but I just need to say it again. Hey, Georgie, what beliefs and customs and practices are being outlawed exactly? Certainly it's, not a friendly Christmas celebration. Certainly it's nothing deliberately exclusive. Certainly it's nothing that is inflicting harm upon others or that is unjustly enriching someone at the expense of someone else. And how does a court invalidate one's own thoughts? The courts can't read my mind. If they did, I'd probably shoot myself or something. I'd be scared shitless. This is a matter that has been of great concern to many legal authorities. The Council of State Governments, composed of representatives of the 50 states, sponsored the proposal just last year, seeking to curb the powers of this body of judicial tyrants. The Conference of Chief Justices of all the state Supreme Courts of this nation has also issued an historic statement urging judicial restraint upon the court. This latter group said, "The value of a firm statement by us lies in the fact that we speak as members of all the state appellate courts with a background of many years' experience in the determination of thousands of cases of all kinds. Surely there are those who will respect the declaration of what we believe. It has long been an American boast that we have a government of laws and not of men. We believe that any study of recent decisions of the Supreme Court will at least raise considerable doubt as to the validity of that boast." In addition, the state legislatures have for years flooded the Congress with resolutions condemning the usurpations of power by the federal judiciary. The court today, just as in 1776, is deaf to the voices of the people and their repeated entreaties. They have become arrogant, contemptuous, high-handed, and literal despots. It has been said that power corrupts, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. There was never greater evidence as to the proof of this statement than in the example of the present federal judiciary. I want to touch upon just a few of the acts of tyranny which have been sanctioned by the United States Supreme Court and compare these acts with the acts of tyranny enumerated in the Declaration of Independence. The colonists objected most strenuously to the imposition of taxes upon the people without their consent. Today, the federal judiciary asserts the same tyrannical power to levy taxes in Prince Edward County, Virginia, and without the consent of the people. Not only that, but they insist upon the power to tell the people what purposes their money must be spent. He doesn't reference anything by name, but I'm pretty sure he's referring to Griffin v. School Board of Prince Edward County, a Supreme Court case from 1964. I'll just read the syllabus on this little website thingy. It basically says that Prince Edward County, in an attempt to bypass school desegregation, closed its public schools, then reopened private schools for white students only, and then gave those white students county grants and tuition helper fund thingies, effectively from tax dollars. And the Supreme Court said you can't do that. I think this really understands just how whiny and entitled George Wallace is acting. He's basically saying, "Oh, you mean the Supreme Court says that we can't give out tuition grants only to white students? Let me just rewrite it around. No, actually, we're victims. They're saying that we can't decide how to spend our own tax dollars." Of course, he conveniently ignores the part where the county is deliberately excluding black students while presumably still collecting taxes from those black students' families. But of course, it doesn't matter. With these right-wing populists, it doesn't matter. They just need to feel victimized, aggrieved, and assaulted. They constantly need to feel like they're the real victims. Even in the literal civil rights movement, a case when I'd say even the most ardent right-wing populist would say, "Oh, if MLK was alive, he'd be conservative." No. All right, if they were around in MLK's day, they'd be standing George fucking Wallace and talking about how victimized they are. Same fucking rhetoric, different fucking year. The colonists stated he has refused to pass other laws for the accommodation of large districts of people unless those people would relinquish the right of representation in the legislature, a right inestimable to them and formidable to tyrants only. Today, the federal judiciary, in one of its most recent decisions, has deprived the American people of the right to use the unit system of representation in their own state governments for the accommodation of large districts of people, and has itself prescribed the manner in which the people shall structure the legislative branch of their own government, and have prescribed how the people shall allocate the legislative powers of state government. More than They have even told the American people that we may not, with a majority of the people voting for the measure, or with 2/3 of those voting, or even by unanimous consent, adopt a provision in our state constitutions to allocate the legislative power of the state government in any manner other than as prescribed by the court. Okay, I'm pretty sure I know what he's referencing. Two specific Supreme Court cases. The first is Baker v. Carr from 1962. The second was Gray v. Sanders from 1963. Starting with Baker v. Carr, the context was the state of Tennessee had not redistricted itself since 1901, which meant that the various, representative, or at least federal representative districts were really not evenly distributed by population, like remotely at all. And basically this is a pretty iconic case. It's, one man, one vote or something like that. And that, every, district in the House of Representatives must be roughly of equal population. The second one, Gray v. Sanders, this one says that state elections must adhere to the one person, one vote principle. So what we have here? Well, what we have here is George Wallace throwing a hissy fit, acting like the victim, because, he has to play by the rules. One person, one vote. People have to have an equal voice. Oh my God. Wah. It's these, why do right-wing populists pick the dumbest fucking things to throw hissy fits about? I seriously don't get it. Is it a rural thing or something? Is it because he's a rural boy and he's afraid that, the cities where black people live, they're going to get more representation now? Wah. This is the end of the republic. No, fuck you. You're dead, George Wallace. You're dead. I get it. And you know what? You're a fascinating figure. I personally think that you weren't racist on a personal level, but you had no issue exploiting it for that sweet, sweet votes. And Arthur Bremer was your fucking karma. I can get more into that later. But you know what? It's the mindset. It's the attitude. Wah. Everything's not specifically bent to me the way it used to. This is literally King George III's tyranny. Wah. Shut up. One justice of the United States Supreme Court said in this connection, and I quote, "To put the matter plainly, there is nothing in all the history of this court's decisions which supports this constitutional rule. The court's draconian pronouncement, which makes unconstitutional the legislatures of most of the 50 states, finds no support in the words of the Constitution, in any prior decision of this court, or in the 175-year political history of our federal union. These decisions mark a long step backward into the unhappy era where a majority of the members of this court were thought by many to have convinced themselves and each other that the demands of the Constitution were to be measured not by what it says, but by their own notions of wise political theory." Two other justices of the court said, "Such a massive repudiation of the experience of our whole past in asserting destructively novel judicial power demands analysis of the role of this court in our constitutional scheme. It may well impair the court's position as the ultimate organ of the supreme law of the land. The only reason it is the supreme law of the land today is because we have a president who cares so little for freedom that he would send the armed forces into the states to enforce the dictatorial decree." Yoo-hoo, Georgie boy, I'm not a farm boy, I'm just a Jersey boy, but I do have to ask, what was this dictatorial decree? I mean, it's Lyndon Johnson, so it's not like you could possibly be referring to Dwight Eisenhower sending in federal troops to enforce Arkansas school integration. So, remind me, what is the dictatorial decree and what are the federal troops enforcing again? It's probably something extremely fucking racist. But Wallace is cleverer than that. He knows what to conveniently exclude and how to paint himself as the fighter against the establishment. Well, you know what? I'm going to say it again because we're still dealing with this fucking bullshit today. Alright? These Dixiecrat brats, they've been the establishment for decades and decades on end. They're not fighting the establishment, they're just mad that the establishment isn't 100% completely devoted to them. They just don't like sharing fucking power with anyone. Any sort of negotiation, that's just treason. I fucking vey with these assholes. Some things never fucking change. Our colonist forefather had something to say about that too. The Declaration of Independence cited as an act of tyranny the fact that, kept among us in times of peace, standing armies without the consent of the legislature. Today, 188 years later, we have actually witnessed the invasion of the state of Arkansas, Mississippi, and Alabama by the armed forces of the United States, and maintained in the state against the will of the people and without consent of state legislatures. It is a form of tyranny worse than that of King George III, who had sent mercenaries against the colonies because today the federal judicial tyrants have sanctioned the use of brother against brother and father against son by federalizing the National Guard. In 1776, the colonists also complained that the monarch has incited domestic insurrections among us. Today, we have absolute proof that the Federal Department of Justice has planned, supervised, financed, and protected acts of insurrection in the southern states, resulting in vandalism, property damage, personal injury, and staggering expense to the states. So, has incited domestic insurrections among us? You know, that was basically polite talk for slave rebellions, right? Like, the Declaration of Independence was quite literally accusing King George III of directly inciting slave rebellions. The Founding Fathers were a bit more, let's say, gentlemanly, and they referred to them as domestic insurrections. You can also see how in the original Constitution, they avoided using the word slave. They would often just say, I don't know, in labor to, or something to that effect. And likewise, we have absolute proof that the Federal Department of Justice has planned, supervised, financed, and protected acts of insurrection in the southern states. You know, that's basically the same thing as like the people today who would say things like, you know, January 6th was a false flag by the FBI or something like that. I was honestly so focused on the domestic insurrection part when I first read this, I didn't even notice the false flag bit. Holy shit, this is Gary Allen logic. It's like, oh, it's been proven, we have proof. Okay? Show me the fucking proof. I mean, I get it. It's a speech in public. He's not going to wave a piece of paper around. This is Gary Allen logic. In 1776, it was charged that the monarchy had asserted power to dissolve representative houses and to punish, for opposing with manly firmness his invasions of the rights of the people. Today, the federal judiciary asserts the power not only to dissolve state legislatures, but to create them and to dissolve all state laws and judicial decrees, and to punish a state governor by trial without jury for opposing with manly firmness his invasions of the rights of the people. The colonists also listed as acts of tyranny the erection of a multitude of new offices and sent hither swarms of officers to harass our people and to eat out their substance, suspending our own legislatures and declaring themselves invested with the power to legislate for us in all cases whatsoever, abolishing the free system of English laws. It had abdicated government here, refusing to assent to the laws enacted by the people. Laws considered most wholesome and necessary for the public good, and for depriving us in many cases of the benefits of trial by jury, for taking away our charters, abolishing our most valuable laws, and altering fundamentally form our government, for suspending our own legislatures, and declaring themselves invested with power to legislate for us in all cases whatsoever. The United States Supreme Court is guilty of each and every one of these acts of tyranny. Therefore, I echo the sentiments of our forefathers who declared, "A prince whose character is thus marked by every act which may define a tyrant is unfit to be a ruler of a free people." Ladies and gentlemen, I have listed only a few of many acts of tyranny which have been committed or specifically sanctioned by the United States Supreme Court. I feel it important that you should know and understand what it is that these people are trying to do. The written opinions of the court are filled with double talk, semantics, jargon, and meaningless phrases. The words they use are not important. The ideas that they represent are the things which count. It is perfectly obvious from the left-wing liberal press and from the left-wing law journals that what the court is saying behind all the jargon is that they don't like our form of government. They think they can establish a better one. In order to do so, it is necessary that they overthrow our existing form, destroy the democratic institutions created by the people, change the outlook, religion, and philosophy, and bring the whole area of human thought, aspiration, action, and organization under the absolute control of the court. Their decisions reveal this to be the goal of the liberal element on the court, which is in a majority at present. It has reached the point where one may no longer look to judicial decisions to determine what the court may do. However, it is possible to predict with accuracy the nature of the opinions to be rendered. One may find the answer in the Communist Manifesto. First off, George Wallace? No. You do not get to complain about democratic institutions being destroyed. Alright, these institutions, they are not fucking democratic. They're basically these plutocratic or aristocratic setups by, the Dixiecrat elites, designed to keep them in perpetual power. Alright? You got that? Also, the outlook, religion, and philosophy. What were these outlooks? What were these religions? What were these philosophies? I need some more detail, man. I feel like you're deliberately excluding stuff that would make you look bad. Maybe it would be the theology that was rooted in the idea that, if black slaves got free, they would just run amok and destroy everything, that they needed benevolent white overlords to take care of them. Ooh woo. Yeah, I'm so mad I fucking ooh wooed. My fucking vey. But also, it clearly must be the communists. Yes, it's actually a communist plot. No actual way that anyone could be unhappy or disappointed in what we're doing. It must be an outside communist plot because we're so amazing. Fuck you. The communists are dedicated to the overthrow of our form of government. They are dedicated to the destruction of the concept of private property. They are dedicated to the object of destroying religion as the basis of moral and ethical values. The communists are determined that all natural resources shall be controlled by the central government, that all productive capacity of the nation shall be under the control of the central government, that the political sovereignty of the people shall be destroyed as an incident to control of local schools. It is their objective to capture the minds of our youth in order to indoctrinate them in what to think and not how to think. I do not call the members of the United States Supreme Court communists, but I do say, and I submit for your judgment, the fact that every single decision of the court in the past 10 years, which related in any way to each of these objectives, has been decided against freedom and in favor of tyranny. A politician must stand on his record. Let the court stand on its record. The record reveals for the past number of years that the chief, if not the only beneficiaries of the present court's rulings, have been duly and lawfully convicted criminals, communists, atheists, and clients of vociferous left-wing minority groups. You can't convict a communist in our federal court system. Neither can you convict one of being a communist in Russia, China, or Cuba. The point is that the United States Supreme Court refuses to recognize the communist conspiracy and their intent to bury us. You gotta specifically... nothing quite says being in favor of tyranny like, letting atheists get some benefits of legal protection. Considering George Wallace refers to just about everything he doesn't like as communism, I'm a bit doubtful as to what he means by communists being beneficiaries. Likewise, lawfully convicted criminals is actually a pretty good way to word it, because let's be real here, this was before you had your whole right to remain silent type thing, before your Miranda rights were much of a thing, and you could, if you didn't have any money, you could basically just kind of be held and forced until you confessed or something like that. And that's apparently in favor of tyranny. Yeah, nothing quite says tyranny like restricting the power of the state. Because you know what? No, it's never been about actual tyranny. It's about the aesthetic of tyranny. He wants that control himself. In fact, editor, just cut this part right now. I'm going to insert a part where George Wallace explicitly talks about how great it would be if the fucking cops ran everything. Just cut this whole little section out and just put a little gap in or whatever to make it a separate file, I guess.
And I want to say in conclusion that you're doing a magnificent job. And I've said many times that if the police in this country could just run it for about 2 years, then we could walk in the parks and on the streets in safety, and you are doing a magnificent job. Thank you very much.
And neither can you convict one of being a communist in Russia, China, or Cuba. I'm really not sure what that means. That might be a typo. There have been a handful of typos in this speech so far that have caught me off guard, but I'm really not sure what it means. Neither can you convict one of being a communist in Russia, China, or Cuba. Like, is he saying that? I don't know what it's saying, really. But at the same time, he's mad that it's not illegal to be a communist. You know, I'm not a commie. I don't care for commies, but they have the same First Amendment rights as everyone else. But no, giving everyone those same First Amendment rights, that's apparently tyranny. It's never about tyranny. It's about the appearance of tyranny. Wallace doesn't give a shit about tyranny. He and his supporters, they want to control the tyranny themselves. It's like that guy, what's his name? Something Rodriguez. I think it was Danny Rodriguez? Danny Rodriguez. You know, that guy who somewhat recently became a bit of a viral sensation for being a Jan 6 rioter who was, crying as he was being questioned by the FBI. One part that I'll never get over is how shortly before Jan 6, maybe a few days or so before, he was at a Back the Blue rally. Then, during the riot, he literally tased a cop and he wrote in a group chat, like, tased the fuck out of the blue. So you see, like, it's not about tyranny. They want to control the tyranny. They love tyranny as long as it's used on someone else. Let us look at the record further with respect to the court's contribution to the destruction of the concept of God and the abolition of religion. The federal court rules that your children shall not be permitted to read the Bible in our public school systems. Let me tell you this, though. We still read the Bible in Alabama schools, and as long as I am the governor, we will continue to read the Bible, no matter what the Supreme Court says. Whiny Wallace, this time, is talking about a specific Supreme Court case, Abington School District v. Shemp. It was an 8-1 Supreme Court case from 1963, which says legally sanctioned or officially mandated Bible reading and prayer in public schools is unconstitutional. That's it. You are allowed to read the Bible and teach the Bible as a religious study class or even as an act of literature. You're just not allowed to enforce or mandate that students have to pray a certain religious way as part of their curriculum. Heck, you can even allow students to pray, or rather, you can't prohibit them from praying. But Whiny Wallace is just on his bullshit. Federal courts will not convict a quote-unquote demonstrator invading and destroying private property. But the federal courts rule you cannot say a simple, God is great, God is good, we thank thee for our food, in kindergarten supported by public funds. I don't know what exactly he's talking about with the demonstrator thing, but I don't think federal courts usually handle that shit. I think that would be up to the state or local courts. I mean, maybe he's referencing something else, but yeah, I'm not really sure what he means by federal courts refusing to convict people who destroy private property. Now let us examine the manner in which the court has continuously chipped away at the concept of private property. It is contended by the left-wing liberals that private property is a mere legal fiction, that one has no inherent right to own and possess property. The courts have restricted and limited the rights of acquisition of property in life, and have decreed its disposition in death, and have ruthlessly set aside the wills of the dead in order to attain social ends decreed by the court. The court has substituted its judgment for that of the testator based on social theory. The courts assert authority even in decree the use of private cemeteries. They assert the right to convert a private place of business into a public place of business without the consent of the owner and without compensation to him. One justice asserts that the mere licensing of a business by the state is sufficient to convert it into control by the federal judiciary as to its use and disposition. Another asserts that the guarantees of equal protection and due process of the law cannot be extended to a corporation. In one instance, following the edicts of the United States Supreme Court, a state Supreme Court ordered and directed a private citizen to sell his home to an individual, contrary to the wishes of the owner. In California, we witnessed a state Supreme Court taking under advisement the question as to whether or not it will compel a bank to make a loan to an applicant on the basis of his race. We have witnessed the sanction by the courts of confiscatory taxation. Let us take a look at the attitude of the court with respect to the control of the private resources of the nation and the allocation of the productive capacity of the nation. The Supreme Court decisions have sanctioned enactment of the Civil Rights Bill. What this bill actually does is empower the United States government to reallocate the entire productive capacity of the agricultural economy covered by quotas and acreage allotments of various types on the basis of race, creed, color, and national origin. It in effect places in the hands of the federal government the right of a farmer to earn a living, making that right dependent upon the consent of the federal government, precisely as is the case in Russia. The power is there. I am not in the least impressed by the protestations that the government will use this power with benevolent discretion. We know that this bill authorizes the President of the United States to allocate all defense productive capacity of this country on the basis of race, creed, or color. It does not matter in the least that he will make such allocations with restraint. The fact that it is possible with a politically dominated agenda or agency to punish and bankrupt and destroy any business that deals with the federal government if it does not bow to the wishes and demands of the President of the United States. Long story short, he's basically saying that, civil rights and anti-discrimination laws are actually attacks on private property. I don't know exactly what he's referring to when he references the Supreme Court of California taking under advisement the question as to whether or not it will compel a bank to make a loan to an applicant on the basis of race. I do know that around this time there was, I believe, Proposition 14 in California, which effectively prohibited the state from outlawing, preventing sales to someone based on race. And then I think the Supreme Court overturned that, but that's a different thing. Likewise, he's doing a pretty good job at spinning how, the president is basically saying, okay, guys, don't discriminate based on race or color or creed when you employ people, and just turning that into the government's going to have complete and total control over every single aspect of American resources and American life. Well, this bill was passed in 1964. It is currently many decades later. We still have a thriving capitalist economy. Shut your fucking dead mouth, George Whiny Wallace. All of us know what the court has done to capture the minds of our children. The federal judiciary has asserted the authority to prescribe regulations with respect to the management, operation, and control of our local schools. The second Brown decision in the infamous school segregation case authorized federal district courts to supervise such matters as teacher hiring, firing, promotion, the expenditure of local funds, both administratively and for capital improvements, additions and renovations, the location of new schools, the drawing of school boundaries, busing and transportation of school children, and, believe it or not, it has asserted the right in the federal judiciary to pass judgment upon the curricula adopted in local public schools. All of us know what the court has done to capture the minds of our children. Yeah, you know it, I know it, we all know it. Although, I do have to ask, what exactly are these federal courts worried about, George Wallace? Could it be the literal fucking racism? Could it be the, 100 years post-Civil War of their sort of bullshit? The chickens have finally come home to fucking roost. A comparatively recent federal court decision in a Florida case actually entered an order embracing each and every one of these assertions of federal supervision. In ruling after ruling, the Supreme Court has overstepped its constitutional authority. While appearing to protect the people's interest, it has in reality become a judicial tyrant. It's the old pattern. The people always have some champion whom they set over them and nurse into greatness. This, and no other, is the foot from which a tyrant springs after first appearing as a protector. This is another way of saying that the people never give up their liberties and their freedom, but under some delusion. But yet there is hope. There is a spirit of resistance in this country which will not be oppressed, and it is awakening. And I am sure there is an abundance of good sense in this country which cannot be deceived. I have personal knowledge of this. 34% of the Wisconsin Democrats supported the beliefs you and I uphold and expound. 30% of the Democrats in Indiana join us in fighting this grab for executive power by those now in control in Washington. And listen to this, 43% of the Democrats in Maryland, practically in view of the nation's capital, believe as you and I believe. This one's actually pretty straightforward. He's describing his recent victory in not victory, but rather results in Democratic Party primaries in certain states. While he didn't win any of those states except for maybe Indiana, the fact that he had any modicum of a good job really put him on the map and concerned a lot of people. It also concerns me. Yes, we all know he never made it to president, but there are this many fucking whiners. So let me say to you today, take heart. Millions of Americans believe just as we in this great region of the United States believe. I shall never forget last spring as I stood in the midst of a great throng of South Milwaukee supporters at one of the greatest political rallies I have ever witnessed. A fine-looking man grabbed my hand and said, "Governor, I've never been south of South Milwaukee, but I am a Southerner." Of course, he was saying he believed in the principles and philosophy of the Southern people, of you here today and the people of my state of Alabama. He was right. Being a Southerner is no longer geographic. It's a philosophy and an attitude. It better fucking not be. This is why it's my dream in life to bully the fucking South. If we don't bully the South, they're gonna bully the rest of us. And that ain't never fun. One destined to be a national philosophy embraced by millions of Americans, which shall assume the mantle of leadership and steady a governmental structure in these days of crises. Certainly I am a candidate for President of the United States. If the left-wingers do not think I am serious, let them consider this. I am going to take our fight to the people, the court of public opinion, where truth and common sense will eventually prevail. At this time, I have definite concrete plans to get presidential electors pledged to me on the ballots in the following states: Florida, Georgia, South Carolina, North Carolina, Virginia, New York, Indiana, Illinois, Wisconsin, Missouri, Kentucky, Arkansas, Tennessee, and of course, Alabama, Mississippi, and Louisiana. Other states are under serious consideration. A candidate for president must receive 270 electoral votes to win. The states I am definitely going to enter represent 218 electoral votes. Conservatives of this nation constitute the balance of power in presidential elections. I am a conservative. Actually, he's running as a Democrat. That makes him a liberal. Yeah, send that to your annoying fucking uncle. I intend to give the American people a clear choice. I welcome a fight between our philosophy and the liberal left-wing dogma which now threatens to engulf every man, woman, and child in the United States. I am in this race because I believe the American people have been pushed around long enough, and that they, like you and I, are fed up with the continuing trend towards a socialist state which now subjects the individual to the dictates of an all-powerful central government. Sure feels that way, don't it? Just feels so bad that you can't discriminate anymore. Oh, boo-hoo, I can't accuse someone of being a communist and they get legally punished. Oh, boo-hoo, I can't penalize an atheist. Oh, boo-hoo, kids aren't allowed to be forced to adhere to my religious views in school. It's as if other people are allowed to have rights. Oh, boo-hoo. I am running for president because I was born free. I want to remain free. I want your children and mine and our prosperity to be unencumbered by the manipulations of a soulless state. I intend to fight for a positive, affirmative program to restore constitutional government and to stop the senseless bloodletting now being performed on the body of liberty by those who lead us willingly and dangerously close to a totalitarian central government. In our nation, man has always been sovereign and the state has been his servant. This philosophy has made the United States the greatest free nation in history. This freedom was not a gift. It was won by work, by sweat, by tears, by war, by whatever it took to be and to remain free. Are we today less resolute, less determined, and courageous than our fathers and grandfathers? Are we to abandon this priceless heritage that has carried us to our present position of achievement and leadership? I say, if we are to abandon our heritage, let it be done in the open and full knowledge of what we do. We are not unmindful and careless of our future. We will not stand aside while our conscientious convictions tell us that a dictatorial Supreme Court has taken away our rights and liberties. We will not stand idly by while the Supreme Court continues to invade the prerogatives left rightfully to the states by the Constitution. We must not be misled by left-wing incompetent news media that day after day feed us a diet of fantasy telling us we are bigots, racist, and hate-mongers to oppose the destruction of the Constitution and our nation. A left-wing monster has risen up in this nation. It has invaded the government. It has invaded the news media. It has invaded the leadership of many of our churches. It has invaded every phase and aspect of the life of freedom-loving Americans. It consists of many and various powerful interests, but it has combined into one massive drive and is held together by the cohesive power of the emotion, setting forth civil rights as supreme to all. But in reality, it is a drive to destroy the rights of private property, to destroy the freedom and liberty of you and me. And my friends, where there are no property rights, there are no human rights. Red China and Soviet Russia are prime examples. Interestingly enough, it was actually this specific set of paragraphs that inspired me to read this speech in the first place, or at least read it out loud. First part. We must not be misled by left-wing incompetent news media that day after day feed us a diet of fantasy telling us that we're bigots, racist, and hate-mongers. So yeah, even in the fucking civil rights movement, the opponents were like, no, we're not the bad guys, the liberal media's, they're calling us bigots and racists, we're the victims. I fucking vey. But then, just adding to it, there's a left-wing monster that has taken over the government, the news media, and also many churches. Oh, yeah. It's not that times are changing. No. It's a left-wing monster. An unnatural beast. The communists, they're taking over everything. They rule everything. You can't trust anything, because anything could be fucking communist. And of course, civil rights. You know who else wanted civil rights? The fucking commies. This is secretly a commie fucking plot. Yeah, you know what? Just, I should make a... Hey, editor, can you just, make a little kind of just separate cut of this area that I can post just to hand out to people? You know, the part that, let's see, it starts with, we must not be misled by left-wing incompetent news media, and ends with, Red China and Soviet Russia are prime examples. Thank you. Politically evil men have combined and arranged themselves against us. The good people of this nation must now associate themselves together, else we will fall one by one to an unpitied sacrifice in a struggle which threatens to engulf the entire nation. We can win. We can control the election of the president in November. Our object must be our country, our whole country, and nothing but our country. If we stand together, the people of this state, the people of my state, the people throughout this great region, yes, throughout the United States, then we can be the balance of power. We can determine who will be the next president. Georgia is a great state. Atlanta is a great city. I know you will demonstrate that greatness in November by joining Alabama and other states throughout the South in electing the next president of the United States. We are not going to change anything by sitting on our hands hoping that things will change for the better. Those who cherish individual freedom have a job to do. First, let it be known that we intend to take the offensive and carry our fight for freedom across this nation. We will wield the power that is ours, the power of the people. Let it be known that we will no longer tolerate the boot of tyranny. We will no longer hide our heads in the sand. We will reschool our thoughts in the lessons our forefathers knew so well. We must destroy the power to dictate, to forbid, to require, to demand, to distribute, to edict, and to judge what is best and enforce that will of judgment upon free citizens. We must revitalize a government founded in this nation on faith in God. I ask that you join with me and that together we give an active and courageous leadership to the millions of people throughout this nation who look with hope and faith to our fight to preserve our constitutional system of government with its guarantees of liberty and justice for all within the framework of our priceless freedoms. I just spent the better part of the last hour getting mad at a speech delivered decades ago by a long-dead man. I can stay as mad as I want, but the fact of the matter is I'm 60 years too late to really put a dent in his popularity and following. The only thing that I can really express is my exasperation as I see the Tillman Cycle play out again, and again, and again. Start with the following, if you will. You have the people, represented as a single monolithic block. The people are hard-working, folksy folks, the kind of folks who are proud of their traditions and want simply to live a good life in this often harsh and unforgiving world. They tend to be moderately religious and are some sort of quasi-representation of the average Joe, or at least whomever they think the average Joe should be. Then you assert that there are two main forces in charge, the quote-unquote left and quote-unquote right. Of course, the exact details of what counts as left and right, well, it'll vary a bit depending on the time and place we're talking. The left is this near all-encompassing force, well-funded and well-organized. They are an alien elite who are low in number, but high in ability. They control virtually every important institution and can effortlessly manipulate the levers of power to accomplish their nefarious goals, whatever they may be. Despite their lack of numbers, the leftist elites will exploit the power of the masses, people who are somehow quote-unquote beneath the people. This confuses and overwhelms the regular people, and perhaps even members of the regulars get suckered into it as well. These unwashed masses will use the authority, explicitly or implicitly, granted to them by the leftist elites to walk all over the ordinary people. The left wants to destroy everything that the ordinary people hold near and dear, everything that the ordinary people know instinctively to be good and necessary. Should the people rebel, the leftist elites will use their sway over the unwashed masses to enforce their will. And what of the right? The right are incompetent at best, collaborators at worst. They are made up of dudes and dandies, effete softies who have grown fat and happy, while the peasants beneath them suffer. They care only for their personal wealth and prosperity, and will gladly go along with whatever the left proposes. Sure, they'll put up a fight on occasions, but that's merely for show. Deep down, they couldn't give a rat's ass about the people. This makes sense after all, doesn't it? I mean, the old guard, right, is elitist by nature, and you mathematically will have far more commoners than elites. That's why you need a strong leader to tear down the system, a system dominated by the left and guarded by the right, a strong leader who is in touch with the needs of the people, a leader who will ensure that the government works in the interests of the people, which never really happens, thus spinneth the Tillman Cycle. My main issue with the Tillman Cycle, aside from the violence it often encourages, is the annoying contradictory desires, a desire for liberty only among those who conform to somewhat arbitrary social norms. George Wallace demands liberty from the federal government, yet he also wants those same federal authorities to prosecute property crimes that rarely fall under federal jurisdiction. The cycle is bloodthirsty, desiring vengeance upon a perceived foe or foes, whom are believed to be responsible for the bulk of society's problems. It may use the rhetoric of "don't tread on me," but that's not the full picture. A fuller picture would be akin to "don't tread on me, tread on them." After all, who is Wallace to complain about his liberties being hamstrung by the feds when he himself wants to force students to pray to his God? In fact, I just remembered a fun little trivia question that you can use to wow your friends. The question is, By English language word count, what is the longest currently active legal constitution? There are two possible correct answers to this. The first correct answer is India, with regard to national constitutions. But for legal constitutions in general, clocking in at 388,882 words, is the state constitution of Alabama. And the main reason for this has something to do with its previous constitution doling out quite a lot of power to individual counties. The white Dixiecrats in charge noted that many counties with majority black populations could, hypothetically, be able to greatly influence state politics if they managed to get together to do so. So to prevent this, the Dixiecrat elites crafted a constitution that effectively makes it so counties have to get the entire state constitution amended if they want to pass a county ordinance. The framers of the state constitution made it explicitly clear. I'll post a link to an official transcript of the state's 1901 Constitutional Convention in the description itself. Just Control F white supremacy and you'll see exactly what I mean. If you are unable to, just know that there is literally an all-caps subheading titled White Supremacy by Law not too far from the top of the page. This bullshit brings me back to Wallace, of course. He talks about the people having control, but does he really mean it? Did the people of Alabama really have a say in the crafting of a constitution that the framers made explicitly clear was intended to screw over as many non-white residents as possible? I doubt Wallace cared. He just wanted to play the victim. Only someone with a victim complex half a mile long could look at rules that mandate one person, one vote, and see that as an attack upon democratic institutions. Before I finally conclude, I need to point out one vitally important aspect of George Wallace that is often overlooked. Prior to running for governor, he was a locally elected county judge. Despite what you might think, he actually had a proud reputation for treating black and white plaintiffs, defendants, and otherwise with fair and equitable treatment. And he didn't have to. This was early 1900s Alabama we're talking about. Well, I guess early 1950s or so, but still. The man came from poverty and was a genuine economic populist. Running for governor, he wanted to raise taxes to fund various state programs to benefit the citizens of Alabama. The first time he ran, however, he got his ass whooped by an opponent who basically found the Wikipedia page of ethnic slurs and just ran through him. Upon his defeat, Wallace said, "I got out-end. I'll never get out-end again." Adding to this, he even later said, "I tried talking about good roads and good schools, and these things have been a part of my career, and nobody listened. Then I began talking about ends, and they stomped the floor." In this context, the "they" refers to people at a speech he was giving. It's difficult to feel sympathy for the man, especially after all the hatred he stirred up in the name of his own political clout. And of course, I am not trying to defend him. After all, if somebody attacks me, it doesn't matter if they personally hate me, or if they think attacking me will make them look cool for their friends. What matters here is that the Tillman Cycle gripped the hearts and minds of enough Americans in Wallace's time to make him a true political force. And that same cycle has gripped even more Americans today. The Tillman Cycle is aware that the system is unfair. It is aware that the status quo favors one group over another. The only thing that irks the Tillmanites is that the system doesn't prioritize them. Hello, this is Fiveum saying thank you for listening, and I sincerely hope that you enjoyed it. If you can, please like and share it around, and if you're feeling especially generous, please subscribe. I need at least 100 subscribers to change my YouTube channel's URL, and my default is long and ugly, and I really don't like it. It would be extremely helpful for me if you subscribed. But you don't have to. I'm not your boss. I'm just Fiveum. And right now, I'm signing off.